It's the night before Mother's Day, and the grand ballroom is filled with the kind of opulence that only comes when the city's most influential people gather in one place. Dr. Vanessa Cole stands at the podium, dressed in a flowing black gown, her face composed but warm. The room is hushed as the prestigious Family Healing Foundation awards her with the Lifetime Achievement Award for her decades of work in repairing fractured families. She's the golden standard of family therapy, revered by colleagues, adored by clients, and a pillar of strength to her two children, Eli and Emma. Her speech is poised, a mixture of gratitude and professional humility. As she recounts the many lives she's helped rebuild, she can feel the weight of the accolades washing over her years of sacrifice finally recognized by the people who matter most. It's a perfect moment, a crowning achievement. Vanessa stands tall in the spotlight, smiling graciously, even as the sharp edges of her past stir in the back of her mind. It's almost as though she can hear the faint echo of the words her mother used to say, "No matter how much you mend others, there will always be a tear in your own life." But tonight, the darkness lurking in her past feels distant, a mere whisper, until the letter arrives. The moment Vanessa finishes her speech and exits the stage, a mysterious figure approaches with an envelope in hand. Her stomach twists. She's not sure why, but something about the weight of the envelope feels off. Without a word, the figure hands it to her. She glances at the envelope's creamy exterior, recognizing the lack of a return address. The contents are simple. No extravagant flourishes, no elaborate handwriting, just a single, typed line that shatters the quiet evening like a thunderclap. "You don't get to forget me, Mother." Her fingers tremble, the words searing into her mind. The room around her blurs, her polished smile faltering for a split second. For the first time in decades, Vanessa feels the suffocating grip of her past clawing its way back into her present. Who could this be? And why now, of all times? She looks around, searching for any sign of who might have slipped this into her hands. But the crowd is still applauding, oblivious to the storm now rising inside her. Her heart races. This wasn't just a letter. It was a message, a challenge. For all her professional success, her personal life has always been a carefully constructed lie. No one knows the full story behind Vanessa Cole, the choices she made in her youth, the painful decisions she buried deep in her soul, the child she gave up, her daughter, the one she was never supposed to remember. Until now. As the applause echoes around her, Vanessa's mind races, retracing every moment of her past. A love she couldn't have, a pregnancy she never planned, a child that vanished, and now a voice from that past demanding her attention. Someone is coming for her. Vanessa Cole sat alone in her study that night, the envelope lying open beside her like a wound left unbandaged. Outside, the moon cast pale light across the lacquered bookshelves and framed degrees, symbols of order, logic, success. But inside her, chaos had begun to stir. That single sentence, "You don't get to forget me, Mother," echoed louder with each passing hour. She tried to focus, tried to breathe. But the past had already begun its slow, merciless crawl into the present. She hadn't let herself think about the baby in decades. Not really. She had filed that chapter of her life away, buried it beneath therapy sessions, television appearances, and charity galas. But now, in the silence of the early morning, she allowed herself to remember. She had been 17. Headstrong, brilliant, naive, and utterly in love with a man who was wrong for her in every conceivable way. David Lorne. Twice her age, married and powerful. He was a charismatic political strategist, a man whose charm could convince the world to forget his flaws. Vanessa had been swept away by him. She told herself it was real love. He told her it was forever. But when the pregnancy test came back positive, forever suddenly felt very short. David made promises that he'd leave his wife, that they'd raise the child together, that everything would work out. Then he disappeared, and her mother, Margaret, had stepped in, cold, efficient, unflinching. "You will not ruin your future for a mistake," Margaret had said. "We'll handle this, quietly." And so the arrangements were made. A private facility upstate, no visitors. No name on the birth certificate. Vanessa was told the baby was adopted by strangers, far away, out of reach, out of memory. But she had seen her, just once. A girl with lungs full of fight and a shock of dark curls. Vanessa had begged to hold her, even just for a moment, but Margaret had refused. "It's easier if you don't," she said. Vanessa had cried herself to sleep every night after that. The pain never fully faded. It simply dulled, coated over by time and achievement. Until now. Could it be her? The girl she never held? The daughter who was supposed to have a new life, far from the scandal, far from Vanessa's shadow? Had someone found her? Or worse, had she never left at all? The thought sent a chill down her spine. Her mind raced back to the hospital, to whispered conversations behind doors, to the nurse who had looked at her with pity but said nothing. What if the adoption was never real? What if Margaret had orchestrated something far more elaborate and far more cruel? Vanessa picked up the letter again. Her fingers shook. There was no name, no return address, just a whisper from the past, demanding to be heard. And in her chest, something shifted. A longing that had been buried deep now surged to the surface. Not just fear, but hope. Could her daughter still be out there? And if so, what did she want? To the world, Eli Cole was untouchable. With his square jaw, polished speeches, and tireless charm, he'd become the youngest city councilman in state history. Vanessa's pride and proof that her legacy extended beyond the therapy rooms and lecture halls. He was the golden child. The redemption story. The son who had never given her a moment's doubt. But in the days following the mysterious letter's arrival, something shifted in him. Subtle at first. A missed call here, a delayed visit there. But Vanessa noticed. Of course she did. She had built her entire life on noticing what others missed. When he finally came by, 2 days later than planned, his embrace felt tight, but his eyes stayed scanning, like he was looking past her or over his shoulder. "You've been busy," Vanessa remarked gently, watching him sip the herbal tea she'd brewed, more out of habit than comfort. "Something on your mind?" "Just campaign pressure," Eli said with a practiced smile. "You know how it is." But she did not know. Not this Eli. He was jumpy, his foot tapped under the table. And when her phone buzzed, when she instinctively reached for it, she caught a flicker of panic cross his face. She didn't mention it, but her mind locked it away. That night, Vanessa received the first anonymous phone call. A voice cloaked in static whispered through the line, "He's not who you think he is. Check his campaign finances. Then check your heart." Click. She stood frozen, phone still in hand. The voice was distorted, but the message hit like a hammer. Suspicion began to seep through the cracks of her once unshakable faith in Eli. And then came the second call. Then a third. Each one more precise. Each one darker. In a haze of anxiety, Vanessa accessed public records from Eli's latest campaign filings. The numbers were clean, but too clean. Sanitized. Whitewashed. And too many donors traced back to shell corporations with no clear origin. The more she scratched, the more it felt like someone had deliberately wiped down a mess too big to clean completely. What terrified her most wasn't the money. It was the feeling that Eli knew she'd look, and that he had already prepared for it. She remembered him at 17, cleaning up his messes before she even saw them. He had always been careful, calculated. But where did that instinct come from? Her? Or someone else? Then one morning she found him in her home office. He claimed he was looking for an old photo album, but his hands were rifling through the drawer where she kept the envelope. The letter. The envelope was gone. He acted surprised when she asked, claimed he'd never seen it, but he couldn't meet her eyes. Vanessa said nothing. Not yet. But a new seed of doubt had been planted. Had Eli known about the letter before she did? Was he protecting her or protecting himself? The boy who had once proudly called her his hero now moved through her home like a stranger, with secrets stitched into his suit. And the more she searched for answers, the more Vanessa began to fear something that shook her to her core. Maybe her perfect son wasn't trying to protect the family name. Maybe he was using it. The old Cole estate in upstate New York had been empty for over a year, ever since Vanessa's mother, Margaret, passed. It was a brooding Victorian relic, draped in ivy and silence, standing like a mausoleum to generations of whispered shame and curated appearances. Vanessa had avoided the place since the funeral. Too many rooms where too many things had been left unsaid. But now, with the letter still haunting her thoughts and Eli's behavior becoming increasingly opaque, something inside her pulled her back. Maybe it was the need for answers. Or maybe it was that sixth sense she'd honed after years of listening to other people's buried pain. The attic had always been forbidden when she was a child. Margaret had warned her that it was dangerous, too dusty, too unstable, too full of things that should stay put. But Vanessa, now in her late 50s, no longer feared creaky floorboards or ghost stories. She found the attic door wedged behind an antique armoire. The handle was rusted, and the key Margaret used to wear on a gold chain around her neck still hung from an old hook by the staircase. The door creaked open like a sigh. Dust danced in the air as her flashlight swept over boxes labeled in Margaret's elegant script: holiday decor, tax documents, Cole family recipes. But toward the far corner, beneath a moth-eaten sheet, sat an old cedar trunk Vanessa didn't recognize. No label, no lock. Inside she found the past. Diaries. Dozens of them, all bound in cracked leather, each one dated in neat, deliberate handwriting. Margaret's diaries. The first entry she flipped to began with a phrase that made Vanessa's blood run cold. She always loved the attic window. Clara used to sit there for hours, whispering to herself like the whole world was watching. Clara, a name Vanessa hadn't heard in nearly 30 years. A name that once meant scraped knees, pinky promises, and secrets shared by flashlight under the covers, before it became a ghost, a wound, a disappearance no one could explain. Clara had vanished the summer Vanessa turned 19. Margaret had told everyone that Clara ran away after an episode, that she was unstable, that she was better off away from the family. Over the years, Vanessa convinced herself to stop asking questions. But here, in the pages of her mother's neat, meticulous handwriting, Clara was very much present. And Margaret's tone was not maternal. It was clinical, observant, detached. Another entry read, "She found the photo. I should have hidden it better. If she tells Vanessa, the entire plan will collapse." What photo? What plan? Vanessa's hands trembled as she flipped faster, heart pounding with the rhythm of something ancient and angry waking up. There were references to therapy sessions Clara never consented to, sedatives, institutions. One entry, dated just days before Clara vanished, said only, "It has to be done. For Vanessa's sake." Vanessa closed the diary and staggered back as if Margaret's ghost had reached out and slapped her. For Vanessa's sake? Suddenly, she saw the attic differently. Not as a place of forgotten holiday boxes and childhood relics, but as a crime scene, one no police had ever investigated. One wrapped in lace curtains and denial. Clara didn't run away, she was pushed. And if Clara was still alive out there, what had Vanessa been protected from all these years? Or worse, what had she been protected for? The knock came at dusk, just as the shadows outside Vanessa's home began to stretch long across the garden path. She was in the kitchen, distracted, her mind still spinning from the attic discovery and the disturbing things her mother's journals had revealed about Clara. She hadn't told Eli. She hadn't told anyone. The knock came again, more insistent this time. When Vanessa opened the door, her breath hitched. There she stood, Clara. Older, of course, more weathered, her once bright eyes now dulled by something Vanessa couldn't name. Her hair, a wild halo of gray-streaked auburn, was longer than Vanessa remembered, and her clothes were plain but clean. But it was the scar on her left temple, barely hidden beneath her bangs, that told Vanessa everything. Time had not been kind, neither had anyone else. "Hello, Ness," Clara said, her voice hoarse like it hadn't been used in years. "Still afraid of the dark?" Vanessa felt the floor shift beneath her. She reached for the doorframe for balance, her lips moving before her brain could catch up. "Clara, how?" Clara stepped forward, uninvited but not hostile, her gaze scanning the foyer like a returning soldier unsure of home. It took me a long time to come back. Longer to be believed. Vanessa stood motionless. I thought you were dead? Clara's smile was bitter. They said I was. Said I'd drowned or run off or lost my mind. Your mother made sure no one asked too many questions. And you? She paused. You never came looking. Vanessa felt that accusation land like a stone. I was told you didn't want to be found. That you were sick. That you ran away. That's what Margaret wanted you to believe, Clara said, walking past her and into the living room, where the fire had just begun to flicker. She sat like she belonged there, like no time had passed. But the truth was never about me being unstable. It was about what I knew. Vanessa sat across from her, cautious, wary, but pulled forward by guilt and curiosity. What did you know? Clara looked at her, long and hard, her voice low. That you were pregnant. The air drained from the room. Vanessa's fingers curled tightly around her teacup. How? I saw the letters from him, the man you loved, the one who vanished just before you started showing. I found them in Margaret's drawer, hidden behind all her pearls and lies. You were going to tell me, remember? But before you could, she sent me away. Vanessa shook her head slowly. I thought she told me you were unstable, that you needed treatment. I was never unstable, Clara whispered. I was 16. I was scared, and I was furious. She had me committed, Ness, to a private facility where no one could find me. She paid them to keep me drugged until I couldn't tell up from down. Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes, the truth crashing over her like a rogue wave. Clara, I didn't know. She stole my life, Clara said, the words sharp and brittle. But maybe that wasn't the worst of it. Maybe the worst was what she did with your daughter. Vanessa's heart stopped. What do you mean? Clara leaned in. The adoption? The one she told you went through an agency? What if I told you it didn't? What if I told you that child never left the family? Vanessa felt her pulse in her ears. No, that's not possible. I would have known. You trusted her, Clara said simply. We both did. But Margaret controlled everything. Names, records, truth. She was always 2 steps ahead. Vanessa's thoughts scrambled to connect the dots. The letter. The attic. The diaries. And now this. Clara, back from the dead with more truth than Vanessa could handle. I need proof, Vanessa whispered. If she's still alive, if she's near me, I have to know. Clara nodded. Then we find her. Together. The walls of Vanessa's study had never felt so suffocating. The books on conflict resolution and generational trauma, once the proud tools of her celebrated career, now stared back at her like mocking reminders. She had dedicated her life to untangling the problems of other families. But she could barely make sense of her own. The DNA test results had arrived earlier that morning. Delivered in a plain manila envelope, the kind that seemed too ordinary to contain the kind of truth that could shatter someone's identity. She hadn't opened it right away. She couldn't. Not until Clara arrived. Clara stood now across the table, arms folded, her posture rigid, like she already knew what the envelope would confirm. Are you ready? She asked softly. Vanessa nodded once. Her fingers trembled as she slid the papers from the envelope. The words swam for a moment. Her own name, the test subject, the comparison marker, and then a direct maternal match. Vanessa sat down slowly. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. She's mine, she whispered. It's her. It's really her. Clara didn't react. Not at first. But that's not all of it, she said. Keep reading. Vanessa blinked at the second page. Another name. A second familial connection. Half-sibling. But not to Eli, no. This was something else. A dual lineage match to Clara. Her breath hitched. What is this? Clara stepped closer, her voice calm but somber. It means what we feared. Margaret didn't just lie to you. She rearranged our lives like pieces on a board. Vanessa clutched the paper. She's both of ours? Clara's eyes glistened. No, she's mine. The room tilted. Vanessa's memories began to unravel. Her teen pregnancy, the secrecy, the pain of giving birth and surrendering the baby under her mother's strict guidance. But Clara's revelation shifted the ground beneath it all. Margaret had switched them, hidden the truth. She'd taken Clara's child, passed her off as Vanessa's to be given away, and convinced Vanessa it was her own child she was losing. But why would she do that? Vanessa asked, barely able to get the words out. Why make me believe it was mine? To protect you, Clara said bitterly. You were the golden one, the one with promise. I was the rebellious daughter, already fading from her good graces. She couldn't let my mistake stain your future. Vanessa felt sick. So she erased you. Again. And used me to do it. Clara nodded. And all these years I believed you forgot me, that you abandoned me. But now I see it. She used us both. Vanessa looked down at the results again. The young woman who had sent the letter, the forgotten daughter, was not only family, but the living, breathing proof of Margaret Cole's greatest lie. She's going to want answers, Vanessa said. She deserves them, Clara replied. From both of us. And for the first time in decades, the two sisters stood united, not just in grief, but in resolve. The time for silence was over. The next step would require more than truth. It would demand courage, and the unraveling wasn't done yet. Eli Cole stood behind the podium, delivering a flawless speech to a rapt audience. The press captured every gesture, every carefully timed pause. His campaign for state senator had gained remarkable momentum, his image sculpted with precision, his charm effortless, his family narrative polished to gleaming perfection. Behind the scenes, however, cracks were beginning to form. And now, they were splitting wide open. Vanessa sat in his office hours after the rally. The DNA results and the old adoption papers spread between them like crime scene evidence. Her hands were clenched, the fury in her voice trembled just beneath the surface. When were you going to tell me? She asked. Eli leaned back, his jaw tightening. I wasn't. Vanessa's voice hardened. You knew. You knew she was your sister. You knew who she was this whole time. He hesitated, then nodded. I found the trunk years ago, he said, glancing at the folders, the photos, the ancient diary pages. The letters, the birth records. I pieced it together slowly. At first, I didn't know what to believe, but when I confirmed it, I made a choice. Vanessa could barely comprehend. You used her. I protected our family, he said, with the same politician's calm he used in debates. I couldn't let your past resurface and ruin everything you built. Everything I was building. Vanessa stepped forward. So, you manipulated your sister? Blackmailed her? I gave her what she wanted. Answers, resources, protection. I kept her close, kept her quiet. It wasn't personal. It was strategy. Vanessa's voice dropped to a chilling whisper. She's your sister. Eli met her gaze, cold and unrepentant. And you're my mother. You built your career on controlling stories, managing pain, rewriting trauma. I just did what you taught me. The words landed like blows. Vanessa staggered back. Her son, her miracle child, the boy she'd poured everything into, wasn't just complicit in the deception. He was its architect. He had mirrored her life's work and corrupted it into weaponry. And Clara, she asked, you knew about her too? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Vanessa's knees buckled slightly as the weight of it all pressed down. Her children, both of them, had been woven into a web of silence, control, and betrayal. And Eli had chosen legacy over love, power over truth. I raised you to lead, she whispered, not to destroy. Eli's face softened for just a moment, almost regretful. You raised me to win. As he turned and walked out, leaving his mother amid the shattered documents of her past, Vanessa realized something with a fresh wave of grief. This fall wasn't accidental. It had been engineered, brick by brick, by the one person she never saw coming. And now, the world she built to protect her family was the very thing tearing them apart. The attic smelled like cedar and dust, as if it had been holding its breath for decades. Vanessa stood amid the remnants of her mother's life. Antique trunks, brittle photo albums, boxes labeled in her mother's meticulous script. But it was the ornate jewelry box, tucked behind a false wall panel, that finally opened the floodgates. Inside it, wrapped in aged silk, was a letter addressed to her in Margaret's unmistakable handwriting. "To my daughter Vanessa, when the truth becomes unbearable." With trembling fingers, Vanessa unfolded the pages. The ink faded, but the voice unmistakably sharp, chillingly composed. Margaret's words were not apologetic, they were precise, controlled, just like she had been in life. "You will no doubt find this after you've made a mess of things. If this letter is in your hands, it means the order I tried so hard to preserve has collapsed. So be it. But you should understand one thing, Vanessa. I did what I had to. For the family name. For your future. For Clara's survival. For the child you never should have carried." The room blurred as Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Part rage, part heartbreak. The words were a confession cloaked in self-righteousness. Margaret had orchestrated everything. Her control had stretched far beyond the grave. The letter continued. "You were too emotional, too vulnerable. He would have ruined you. You never saw the danger in that man. But I did. So I ended it. You never knew how close you came to losing everything. And Clara? She was collateral. She was always impulsive, always too curious. I had to keep her quiet. The sanitarium was the only option." Vanessa gasped. Her mother had committed Clara to an institution, not for illness, but for convenience, for silence. The final lines were a slap to the soul. "Your daughter was never supposed to resurface. I arranged everything to ensure she would be loved, hidden, forgotten. You owe me your career, your spotless record, your son's future. Don't spit on my grave pretending this is about morality. It's about survival. And I was better at it than you." Vanessa's hands shook as she dropped the letter. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Margaret hadn't just buried secrets. She'd rewritten history and locked it in a vault. The old woman's legacy wasn't love. It was domination, coercion disguised as maternal wisdom. She hadn't preserved the family. She had mutilated it, piece by piece, in the name of order. As Vanessa backed away from the trunk, she saw something else taped beneath the lid. A photograph of Clara as a teenager, holding a baby. Not Vanessa. Clara. The room seemed to tilt. She had been asking the wrong questions. It wasn't just about where her daughter had gone. It was about who had lost her in the first place. The silence between Vanessa and Clara was heavy, thick with things unsaid and years irretrievably lost. The attic's revelations had cracked something deep within both women. But it was Clara who finally broke the quiet, her voice low as if she were confessing to a priest. "There's something else, Vanessa. Something I never told anyone." They sat across from each other in Vanessa's study, the dim afternoon light filtering through sheer curtains, casting shadows that felt eerily alive. Clara reached into her coat pocket and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Official, clinical, unmistakable. A DNA test. "She's not your daughter," Clara whispered. "She's mine," Vanessa recoiled as if struck. "What are you talking about? I carried her. I gave birth to her." Clara nodded slowly, eyes brimming with tears. "Yes, but it wasn't your child. It was mine. Margaret, our mother. She orchestrated the switch." The room spun. Clara's words came out haltingly, as though each one cost her a piece of herself. "I got pregnant first. Before you. I was 17. The father, he wasn't someone Margaret approved of. She called him disposable. I didn't even get to say goodbye. One day I woke up in the hospital, drugged, sore, and empty. She told me the baby had died. Vanessa stared at her sister, unable to speak. Clara continued, "But the baby didn't die. She was adopted. Illegally, quietly. And then, when you got pregnant months later, Margaret saw her chance. She planned to erase me completely. Make my baby your mistake. Make your story clean, your image spotless." Vanessa's throat closed. "Why would she do that?" Clara laughed bitterly. "Because you were the future, the one who followed the rules, the one she could control. I was a scandal she needed to erase. You were her legacy. I was her liability." Vanessa opened the test results with trembling fingers. The paper confirmed what Clara had said. The woman who claimed to be Vanessa's daughter was, biologically, Clara's. The ground beneath Vanessa's world crumbled. The daughter she mourned, the guilt she carried, the secrets she kept, it had all been built on a lie handed to her by the woman they both called Mother. For Clara, the pain was different, deeper. She hadn't just lost a child, she'd been stripped of the chance to even grieve her properly. Vanessa clutched the paper to her chest, tears spilling freely now. "What have we done?" she whispered. Clara's gaze was steady. "What she did. We're just finally waking up from it." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in violent streaks of red and gold. But inside, two sisters sat in the wreckage of a legacy that had hidden them both from the truth. And the truth was a beast that didn't care whose name was written on the birth certificate, it only cared who paid the price. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, floral arrangements, and carefully curated smiles. The Mother's Day charity gala, Vanessa Cole's crowning jewel, was meant to celebrate women like her, pillars of strength, models of grace, healers of homes. But beneath her flawless exterior, Vanessa was unraveling. Her gown shimmered under the spotlight, but her heart was heavy, with truths too sharp to contain. Eli stood across the room, flanked by political donors and reporters, his campaign team already spinning the night as a celebration of legacy. Clara was nowhere in sight, and the young woman, the daughter, sat quietly at a corner table, her presence both a beacon and a threat. Vanessa gripped the edges of the podium as she stepped up to deliver her long-awaited keynote address. Applause rang out. The cameras rolled, but instead of the polished speech prepared for her, she cleared her throat and let the silence stretch. "Tonight was supposed to be a celebration," she began, her voice trembling. "But I've realized something. You can't celebrate legacy when it's built on lies." A hush swept the room. "You've praised me for healing families. But I couldn't even hold my own together. I gave away a child. I betrayed a sister. And I stood on the ashes of their suffering to build my reputation." Gasps erupted. Eli moved toward the stage, face pale. Vanessa held up a hand to stop him. "I was lied to. But I also chose to believe the lies when the truth was too painful. And for that, I'm sorry." She turned toward the young woman in the audience, eyes so achingly familiar, neither fully hers nor fully Clara's, and yet the embodiment of everything both women had lost. "To my daughter, who should have never had to write that letter alone in the dark, I see you now." Vanessa stepped down from the stage. Cameras flashed wildly. Reporters shouted questions. The room had turned from celebration to chaos in a matter of breaths. Eli tried to intercept her, panic in his eyes. "Mom, what have you done?" She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. "What I should have done a long time ago, told the truth." Clara appeared by the entrance, drawn by the storm of it all, her eyes locking with Vanessa's. No forgiveness was spoken, but something unspoken passed between them, a silent surrender to shared sorrow. By night's end, reputations lay in ruins. Eli's campaign collapsed. Donations to Vanessa's foundation froze. The internet buzzed with theories, scandals, and hashtags. But something else rose from the rubble. The daughter, still unnamed by the press, still holding pieces of two mothers' fractured pasts, stood tall beside Clara and Vanessa. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free, It burns everything down so you can start over. And on this Mother's Day, it wasn't flowers that marked the occasion. It was fire. It was ashes. And finally, it was truth.